Have you ever stopped to observe how your dog looks at you? That penetrating, almost human gaze that seems to decipher your most intimate thoughts. Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychoanalyst, made a disturbing discovery about this coexistence that could completely change your perception of having a canine at home. Jung discovered that something much deeper is happening in this relationship than we imagine. According to his research on the collective unconscious, dogs are not just pets. They are psychic mirrors that reflect hidden aspects of our personality. But the most shocking thing is what he revealed about the fate of those who share their lives with these loyal companions. Prepare to discover truths that go beyond conventional science. What Jung found about canine influence on the human psyche can explain strange behaviors you've never been able to understand in yourself. This isn't just another theory. It's a warning about a silent transformation happening in your mind, shaping who you become without you realizing it. When Jung first began studying the mysterious bond between humans and their canine companions, he stumbled upon something that would shake his understanding of human psychology forever. He noticed that people didn't just own dogs, they unconsciously chose animals that reflected their deepest, most hidden psychological patterns. This wasn't coincidence. It was the unconscious mind at work, seeking external validation for internal struggles we refuse to acknowledge. Think about the aggressive person who owns a pit bull, or the anxious individual who gravitates toward nervous, high-strung breeds. Jung observed that these choices weren't random preferences, but psychological projections. The dog becomes a living, breathing representation of the owner's shadow self, those parts of our personality we've pushed into the darkness of our unconscious mind because they're too uncomfortable to face directly. This phenomenon goes far deeper than simple personality matching. Jung discovered that dogs act as emotional amplifiers, magnifying traits we've been trying to hide from ourselves and others. The person who claims to be calm and peaceful but owns a hyperactive, destructive dog is experiencing what Jung called shadow projection. Their inner chaos, the parts of themselves they've rejected, manifests through their pet's behavior. The most disturbing aspect of this dynamic is how it prevents genuine self-awareness. Instead of confronting their own aggressive tendencies, anxiety, or emotional instability, people externalize these qualities through their dogs. They can express anger through their pet's protective behavior, experience excitement through their dog's hyperactivity, or feel superior through their animal's submission. This creates a false sense of emotional balance while the real psychological work remains undone. Jung noticed that dog owners often describe their pets using language that perfectly describes their own suppressed emotions. "He's so protective of me," they say, when they themselves harbor deep anger toward the world. "She's just so anxious around strangers," they explain, while avoiding their own social fears. The dog becomes a safe container for feelings they can't admit to having. This projection mechanism serves as both revelation and concealment. While the choice of dog reveals hidden aspects of the owner's psyche, it simultaneously allows them to avoid direct confrontation with these shadow elements. They can observe their own psychological patterns playing out through their pet without taking personal responsibility for these traits. Perhaps most troubling is how this dynamic stunts emotional growth. When we use dogs as vessels for our shadow qualities, we rob ourselves of the opportunity to integrate these aspects into our conscious personality. Jung believed that psychological wholeness required acknowledging and accepting all parts of ourselves, both light and dark. By projecting our shadow onto our dogs, we remain psychologically fragmented. The relationship becomes a hall of mirrors where neither true self-awareness nor genuine growth can occur. The owner remains convinced they're loving and nurturing while their dog acts out their suppressed aggression. They believe they're calm and controlled while their pet displays their hidden anxiety. This self-deception prevents the kind of honest self-examination that leads to psychological maturity. Jung warned that this unconscious projection creates a dangerous psychological dependency. The owner becomes addicted not just to their dog's companionship, but to the emotional outlet the animal provides. Without their canine shadow carrier, they would be forced to confront aspects of themselves they've spent years avoiding. This explains why some people become devastated beyond normal grief when they lose a pet. They're not just mourning a companion, they're facing the return of psychological material they've been projecting outward. The most insidious part of this dynamic is its invisibility. Unlike human relationships where projection can be challenged and confronted, dogs can't tell their owners, "This isn't about me, this is about you." They simply absorb and reflect whatever psychological energy is directed at them, creating the perfect conditions for sustained self-deception. This shadow projection also explains why dog owners often struggle with genuine intimacy in human relationships. They've become accustomed to a relationship dynamic where their hidden emotions are expressed indirectly through another being who can't challenge or question their projections. Human relationships, with their demands for honesty, direct communication, and mutual psychological growth, become threatening by comparison. Jung's most alarming discovery wasn't just that people project their shadows onto dogs, but that they gradually replace authentic human emotional bonds with these psychologically safer canine relationships. He observed a pattern where individuals who struggled with the complexity and unpredictability of human love found refuge in the simpler, more controllable affection of dogs. What appeared to be innocent pet ownership was actually a sophisticated avoidance mechanism that prevented genuine emotional development. The appeal is understandable. Dogs offer what Jung called unconditional positive regard without the psychological demands that come with human relationships. They don't judge, criticize, or expect emotional reciprocity in the same way humans do. For someone who has been hurt, rejected, or traumatized by human relationships, this can feel like emotional salvation. But Jung recognized this apparent blessing as a psychological trap that keeps people emotionally stunted. Human relationships require what Jung termed psychological differentiation, the ability to maintain your own identity while genuinely connecting with another complex being. This process is difficult, often painful, but essential for psychological maturity. It demands that we learn to navigate conflict, practice forgiveness, communicate our needs clearly, and respect boundaries. These skills can only be developed through practice with other humans who challenge us to grow. Dogs, however loving, cannot provide this kind of psychological development. They operate primarily on instinct and conditioning, offering a type of connection that, while emotionally satisfying, lacks the complexity necessary for human psychological growth. When people substitute canine relationships for human ones, they miss crucial developmental opportunities that can never be fully recovered later in life. Jung noticed that people caught in this emotional trap often develop what he called relationship-arrested development. They remained psychologically stuck at whatever stage they were at when they began using dogs as primary emotional support. Their capacity for mature love, compromise, and genuine intimacy fails to develop because these skills require human-to-human practice under real-world conditions. The trap becomes self-reinforcing over time. As people become more comfortable with the predictable love of dogs, human relationships begin to feel increasingly foreign and threatening. The messiness of human emotion, the unpredictability of human behavior, and the demands of human intimacy start to feel overwhelming. They retreat further into the safety of canine companionship, telling themselves they prefer the purity of animal love to the complications of human relationships. This retreat has profound psychological consequences. Jung observed that people who primarily rely on dogs for emotional connection often develop a distorted understanding of love itself. They begin to believe that real love should be unconditional, undemanding, and without conflict. When human relationships inevitably involve disagreement, growth challenges, and mutual responsibility, these individuals interpret normal relationship dynamics as evidence that human love is inferior or corrupt. The emotional trap also creates a false sense of emotional fulfillment. People convince themselves they're experiencing deep, meaningful relationships when they're actually engaging in one-sided emotional exchanges. Dogs cannot truly understand human emotional complexity, offer genuine empathy based on shared experience, or provide the kind of mutual support that characterizes mature human bonds. Yet the chemical rush of oxytocin and dopamine that comes from petting and playing with dogs can create the illusion of profound connection. Jung was particularly concerned about how this trap affects the development of emotional resilience. Human relationships teach us to cope with disappointment, work through conflict, and rebuild trust after betrayal. These experiences, while painful, are essential for developing psychological strength and emotional wisdom. When people avoid these challenges by retreating into canine relationships, they remain emotionally fragile and ill-equipped to handle the inevitable difficulties of adult life. The trap becomes most apparent when these individuals are forced into human relationships through work, family obligations, or life circumstances. They often struggle with basic relationship skills that others take for granted, things like reading social cues, managing conflict constructively, or maintaining appropriate emotional boundaries. Their primary relationship training has come from interactions with animals who cannot teach these essential human skills. Perhaps most tragically, people caught in this emotional trap often miss out on the unique gifts that only human relationships can provide: intellectual stimulation, shared meaning-making, collaborative creativity, and the deep satisfaction that comes from being truly known and accepted by another complex human being. They settle for the emotional equivalent of fast food when they could be experiencing a rich, varied, and nourishing emotional diet. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the SIM Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. Jung identified something far more sinister than simple pet attachment. He discovered that many dog owners develop what he termed compensatory dependency, a psychological addiction so subtle and socially acceptable that it goes completely unrecognized by both the individual and society at large. Unlike obvious addictions to substances or behaviors, this dependency masquerades as love, responsibility, and even virtue, making it nearly impossible to identify or address. The addiction begins innocently enough. A person gets a dog for companionship, security, or simply because they enjoy animals. But Jung observed that certain individuals quickly begin using their pets to regulate their emotional states in ways that mirror classic addiction patterns. They turn to their dogs for comfort when stressed, for validation when feeling worthless, and for distraction when facing difficult life circumstances. The dog becomes their primary coping mechanism, their emotional crutch. What makes this addiction invisible is its social acceptability. Society celebrates devoted pet owners, viewing their dedication as admirable rather than concerning. When someone spends excessive money on their dog, rearranges their entire life around their pet's needs, or becomes anxious when separated from their animal, These behaviors are often praised as examples of responsible pet ownership rather than recognized as symptoms of psychological dependence. Jung noticed that people with this invisible addiction exhibit classic withdrawal symptoms when separated from their dogs, even briefly. They experience anxiety, restlessness, and an inability to focus on other activities. They constantly worry about their pet's well-being, check in frequently when away, and cut short activities to return home. Yet because these behaviors seem caring rather than compulsive, the addictive nature remains hidden. The psychological mechanism behind this addiction involves what Jung called emotional displacement. Instead of developing internal resources for managing stress, anxiety, or loneliness, individuals transfer these responsibilities to their dogs. The animal becomes their external emotional regulation system. When they feel upset, they pet their dog and feel better. When they feel lonely, they talk to their dog and feel connected. When they feel purposeless, they focus on their dog's needs and feel important. This displacement prevents the development of crucial psychological skills. Healthy adults learn to self-soothe, manage their own emotions, and find meaning through various sources. But those caught in canine dependency never develop these abilities because their dog serves all these functions. They remain psychologically dependent, unable to cope with life's challenges without their animal companion. The addiction also creates what Jung termed reality distortion. Dependent individuals begin to believe their dog understands them in ways that humans cannot. They attribute human-like emotions, thoughts, and motivations to their pets, creating an elaborate fantasy relationship that feels more real and satisfying than actual human connections. This distortion feeds the addiction by making the dog seem like the perfect companion who meets all their emotional needs. Perhaps most concerning is how this addiction stunts personal growth. Jung believed that psychological development requires facing and overcoming challenges, developing resilience through adversity, and learning to find strength within ourselves. But when people use dogs as their primary coping mechanism, they avoid these growth opportunities. They remain emotionally stunted, unable to handle adult responsibilities without their canine support system. The invisible nature of this addiction makes intervention nearly impossible. Friends and family members who express concern are often dismissed as not understanding the special bond between the person and their dog. Mental health professionals frequently overlook the dependency because it appears functional on the surface. The person maintains employment, relationships, and daily routines, all while being psychologically addicted to their pet. Jung observed that this addiction often intensifies during times of stress or life transitions. When facing job loss, divorce, illness, or other major challenges, instead of developing new coping skills or seeking appropriate support, these individuals deepen their reliance on their dogs. They may get additional pets, spend even more time and money on their animals, or become increasingly isolated from human support systems. The addiction also creates a false sense of emotional security. Dependent individuals believe they have found the answer to life's emotional challenges through their relationship with their dog. This false confidence prevents them from recognizing their psychological vulnerability and seeking the kind of growth experiences that would lead to genuine emotional maturity and resilience. Breaking free from this invisible addiction requires first recognizing its existence, which is often the most difficult step. The addiction hides behind love, care, and social approval, making it nearly impossible for those caught in its grip to see their dependency clearly. Jung warned that without recognition and intervention, this addiction only deepens over time, creating increasingly rigid patterns of psychological dependence that become harder to break with each passing year. Jung's research revealed a disturbing pattern among devoted dog owners. Their capacity for successful human relationships seemed to deteriorate in direct proportion to their deepening bond with their pets. He discovered that the skills, Expectations and emotional patterns developed through intense canine relationships actually work against the requirements of healthy human partnerships, creating what he called relational incompetence that becomes more pronounced over time. The fundamental problem lies in the vast differences between canine and human emotional needs. Dogs thrive on routine, clear hierarchies, and consistent responses to their behaviors. They don't engage in complex emotional processing, hold grudges, or require deep psychological understanding. Human relationships, however, demand flexibility, emotional intelligence, mutual growth, and the ability to navigate constantly changing dynamics. When people become accustomed to the simpler emotional landscape of dog relationships, they lose the skills necessary for human partnership success. Jung observed that devoted dog owners often develop what he termed emotional rigidity. They become so comfortable with the predictable responses of their pets that they lose the ability to adapt to human emotional complexity. When their human partners experience mood changes, need space to process feelings, or express emotions in ways the dog owner doesn't immediately understand, these individuals often respond with frustration or withdrawal rather than curiosity and empathy. The problem deepens because dogs cannot provide feedback about relationship skills. If someone is being controlling, emotionally unavailable, or poor at communication, their dog will still show affection and loyalty. This lack of honest feedback allows poor relationship habits to develop and strengthen without correction. When these same individuals enter human relationships, they're shocked to discover that their partners have needs, boundaries, and expectations that their dogs never expressed. Jung noticed that people who prioritize dog relationships often struggle with emotional reciprocity in human partnerships. They become accustomed to being the sole focus of their pet's attention and affection, developing unconscious expectations that human partners should provide similar devoted attention. When human partners naturally have their own interests, friendships, and emotional needs, devoted dog owners often interpret this as rejection or inadequate love. The timing and scheduling conflicts created by intense dog ownership also sabotage human relationships. Partners who must constantly work around dog walking schedules, training sessions, veterinary appointments, and the emotional needs of pets often feel like they're competing with animals for attention and priority. Jung observed that people caught in this pattern consistently choose their dog's needs over their partner's needs, justifying this choice as responsibility while remaining blind to its relationship-destroying effects. Perhaps most damaging is how devoted dog ownership affects conflict resolution skills. Dogs don't engage in arguments, require negotiations, or need complex problem-solving discussions. They respond to authority, routine, and basic needs fulfillment. People who primarily practice relationship skills with animals never learn the sophisticated communication techniques required for healthy human conflict resolution. When disagreements arise with human partners, they often attempt to use the same authoritative or dismissive approaches that work with dogs, creating escalating tensions and unresolved issues. Jung also identified what he called loyalty confusion among devoted dog owners. They become so accustomed to the absolute, unquestioning loyalty of dogs that they struggle to understand and accept the more complex loyalty patterns of human relationships. Human partners may disagree with them, maintain relationships with people they don't like, or have divided loyalties between family, friends, and romantic partners. Dog owners often interpret this normal human behavior as betrayal or insufficient commitment. The expectation of unconditional love, learned from dog relationships, creates impossible standards for human partners. Dogs love their owners regardless of mood, behavior, or treatment, within reasonable limits. But healthy human love includes boundaries, expectations, and the requirement for mutual respect and growth. When devoted dog owners enter human relationships expecting the same unconditional acceptance they receive from their pets, they're setting up both themselves and their partners for failure and disappointment. Jung observed that the physical affection patterns learned from dogs also interfere with human intimacy. Dog owners become accustomed to giving and receiving affection on their own terms, whenever they want it, without considering the other being's emotional state or needs. Dogs generally accept petting and cuddling whenever it's offered. But human partners have complex needs around timing, consent, and emotional connection that devoted dog owners often fail to recognize or respect. The most tragic aspect of this relationship dysfunction is its self-perpetuating nature. When human relationships fail, devoted dog owners often conclude that humans are unreliable, demanding, or inferior to dogs. They retreat further into their animal relationships, missing opportunities to develop the skills that would make their next human relationship more successful. Each failed relationship becomes evidence that dogs are better companions than humans, rather than feedback about skills that need development. Jung uncovered one of the most troubling aspects of modern dog ownership: the unconscious use of pets as elaborate escape mechanisms from the psychological demands of adult life. He observed that many individuals, faced with the complexities of career advancement, intimate relationships, financial responsibility, and personal growth, retreat into the simpler world of dog care, where they can feel competent, needed, and successful, without confronting their deeper fears about adult inadequacy. This escape manifests in countless ways that appear virtuous on the surface. People claim they're too busy caring for their dogs to pursue challenging career opportunities, develop new skills, or engage in demanding relationships. They present their pet responsibilities as evidence of their caring nature, while unconsciously using these same responsibilities to avoid situations where they might fail, be rejected, or discover their own limitations. The dog becomes a socially acceptable excuse for avoiding the risks inherent in psychological growth. Jung recognized this pattern as particularly insidious because it provides genuine satisfaction and purpose while simultaneously preventing developmental progress. Caring for a dog offers immediate feedback. The animal is fed, exercised, groomed, and responds with apparent gratitude and affection. This creates a sense of accomplishment and meaning that can substitute for the more complex, uncertain rewards of pursuing challenging goals in career, relationships, or personal development. The escape becomes most apparent in how devoted dog owners structure their time and priorities. They fill their schedules with pet-related activities, multiple walks, training sessions, grooming appointments, socialization activities, and health maintenance routines. These activities consume the time and energy that could be directed toward pursuing education, building professional skills, developing deeper friendships, or engaging in creative pursuits that might lead to personal growth, but also involve risk of failure or disappointment. Jung noted that this time displacement serves a psychological function beyond simple avoidance. When people are constantly busy with dog care, they can maintain the illusion of being responsible, productive adults while avoiding the more challenging aspects of adult responsibility. They tell themselves and others that they're too busy to pursue relationships, career advancement, or personal goals, when in reality they've structured their lives to make such pursuits impossible. The escape also provides what Jung called artificial mastery. In the complex world of adult achievement, success is uncertain, standards are high, and failure is common. But with dogs, even mediocre care produces visible results. A healthy, happy animal who depends on and apparently adores their caretaker. This creates a false sense of competence that can substitute for the more difficult work of developing genuine skills and capabilities in human domains. Perhaps most concerning is how this escape affects decision-making processes. When faced with opportunities for growth, challenge, or change, devoted dog owners often automatically consider how these opportunities would affect their pets, rather than evaluating them based on personal development potential. Job opportunities in different cities are rejected because of dog logistics. Educational programs are avoided because they would require time away from pets. Relationships are limited to people who share their dog obsession, drastically narrowing their social and romantic possibilities. Jung observed that people using dogs as escape mechanisms often develop what he termed learned helplessness in adult domains while maintaining confidence in pet care. They convince themselves they're incapable of success in business, unsuited for challenging relationships, or too old to learn new skills, while simultaneously managing complex pet care routines that require significant organizational ability, financial planning, and consistent execution. This selective competence reveals the psychological nature of their limitations rather than actual inability. The escape becomes self-reinforcing over time. As people spend more time and energy on dog care and less on developing adult capabilities, they actually do become less competent in human domains. Their skills atrophy, their confidence decreases, and their fear of failure increases. The gap between their dog care competence and their adult life incompetence widens, making the pet relationship seem even more appealing by comparison. Jung was particularly concerned about how this escape affects long-term life satisfaction. While caring for dogs provides immediate gratification, it cannot substitute for the deeper fulfillment that comes from meaningful work, intimate human relationships, creative expression, and personal growth. People who use pets as primary escape mechanisms often experience a vague sense of emptiness or disappointment with their lives, without understanding why they feel unfulfilled despite their obvious love and dedication to their animals. The escape also creates practical vulnerabilities that become apparent during life crises. When health problems, financial difficulties, or major life changes occur, people who have used dogs as escape mechanisms often find themselves unprepared for adult challenges. They lack the professional networks, problem-solving skills, emotional resilience, and support systems that would have developed through engaging with complex adult responsibilities rather than avoiding them through pet care. Most tragically, Jung observed that this escape mechanism often persists even when people recognize its limiting effects. The comfort and security of the dog relationship, combined with increased fear and decreased confidence in adult domains, creates a psychological prison that becomes harder to escape over time. The very mechanism that initially provided relief from adult anxiety becomes the source of long-term life limitation and regret. Jung's most profound insight about human-dog relationships involved recognizing the hidden psychological costs of what appears to be pure benefit. While society celebrates the unconditional love that dogs provide, Jung discovered that this very quality exacts a steep price in human psychological development, creating what he called emotional atrophy, the gradual weakening of capacities that can only be developed through challenging conditional human relationships. The first major sacrifice involves the loss of emotional resilience. Human relationships naturally involve disappointment, conflict, rejection, and the need to earn love and respect through behavior and character development. These experiences, while painful, build psychological strength and emotional intelligence. When people primarily experience unconditional acceptance from dogs, they lose opportunities to develop the resilience needed for adult life. They become emotionally fragile, unable to handle criticism, rejection, or conflict without devastating psychological impact. Jung observed that people who rely heavily on unconditional canine love often sacrifice their capacity for self-improvement. Dogs love their owners regardless of personal growth, achievement, or moral development. This unconditional acceptance can create psychological complacency, where individuals stop pushing themselves to develop better character, skills, or emotional maturity because they already receive love and validation from their pets. They lose the healthy dissatisfaction that motivates human growth and development. The sacrifice of authentic self-knowledge represents another hidden cost. Dogs cannot provide honest feedback about personality flaws, behavioral problems, or areas needing improvement. They respond to their owners with consistent affection, regardless of whether the person is being selfish, cruel, dishonest, or irresponsible. This lack of honest feedback prevents the self-awareness that comes from relationships with beings who can observe, evaluate, and respond to human behavior with discrimination and judgment. Jung identified the loss of reciprocity skills as particularly damaging. Healthy human relationships require mutual give and take, compromise, and consideration of another's needs and perspectives. Dogs, while having basic needs, cannot engage in the complex reciprocal exchanges that characterize mature human relationships. People who primarily practice relationship skills with animals never fully develop the capacity for mutual support, shared decision-making, and balanced emotional exchange that healthy adult relationships require. The sacrifice of intellectual growth through disagreement and debate represents another significant loss. Dogs cannot challenge their owners' ideas, present alternative perspectives, or engage in the kind of intellectual friction that promotes cognitive development. People who primarily engage with animals miss the mental stimulation and growth that comes from having their ideas questioned, their assumptions challenged, and their thinking refined through interaction with other intelligent beings. Jung was particularly concerned about the sacrifice of moral development. Human relationships provide natural consequences for selfish, cruel, or unethical behavior through social feedback, relationship consequences, and community response. Dogs, however, cannot hold their owners morally accountable in meaningful ways. This lack of moral feedback can lead to character stagnation, where individuals never fully develop empathy, consideration for others, or ethical reasoning because their primary relationship provides love regardless of moral behavior. The loss of collaborative achievement represents another hidden cost. While dogs can be trained to perform tasks, they cannot engage in the complex collaborative projects that characterize human achievement. Creating businesses, solving problems together, building families, or contributing to community goals. People who primarily invest their relational energy in animals miss opportunities for the deep satisfaction that comes from shared accomplishment and mutual contribution to meaningful goals. Jung observed that people making these sacrifices often experience what he called existential emptiness, a vague sense that something important is missing from their lives, despite their obvious love for their pets. This emptiness stems from the human need for growth, challenge, and development that cannot be met through relationships with beings who love unconditionally and make no demands for personal evolution. The sacrifice of emotional complexity represents perhaps the most significant loss. Human emotions develop through interaction with other complex emotional beings who can understand, mirror, and respond to sophisticated emotional states. Dogs, while capable of basic emotional responses, cannot engage with the full range of human emotional experience. People who primarily experience emotional connection through animals often remain emotionally underdeveloped, unable to experience or express the more sophisticated emotions that characterize psychological maturity. Perhaps most tragically, Jung discovered that people making these sacrifices often remain unaware of what they've lost until major life events force them to rely on capabilities they never developed. When they face serious illness, career challenges, family crises, or other adult difficulties, they discover their emotional, social, and psychological resources are inadequate for the situation. The unconditional love that felt like such a gift reveals itself as having prevented the development of crucial life skills and emotional capacities that cannot be quickly developed in crisis situations. Jung developed what he called diagnostic indicators, specific behavioral and psychological patterns that reveal when someone has crossed the line from healthy pet ownership into the dangerous territory of psychological dependency and developmental arrest. These signs often appear gradually and are frequently rationalized as normal pet love, making them particularly insidious because they're disguised as virtues rather than recognized as symptoms of psychological dysfunction. The first major warning sign involves what Jung termed priority inversion, when pet needs consistently take precedence over human relationships, career advancement, or personal growth opportunities. This manifests when people regularly cancel social plans because their dog seems anxious, turn down job opportunities because they worry about their pet's adjustment, or end romantic relationships because partners don't share their level of dog devotion. While these choices might seem caring, they reveal a psychological dependency that prevents normal adult development and decision-making. Jung identified emotional substitution as another critical warning sign. This occurs when people begin using their relationship with their dog to meet emotional needs that should be fulfilled through human connections. They confide in their pets instead of friends, seek comfort from animals rather than family members, or feel their deepest emotional connection is with their dog rather than any human being. When the pet relationship becomes the primary source of emotional fulfillment, normal human emotional development stops progressing. Financial dysfunction represents a particularly revealing indicator. Jung observed that people in the risk zone often spend disproportionate amounts of money on their pets while neglecting their own financial security or future planning. They purchase expensive organic food for their dogs while eating cheap processed meals themselves, spend thousands on veterinary procedures while avoiding their own health care, or go into debt for pet expenses while failing to save for retirement or emergencies. This financial distortion reveals how the pet relationship has disrupted normal adult priorities and self-care. Social isolation patterns provide another clear warning sign. People entering Jung's risk zone gradually lose interest in activities, friendships, and social connections that don't involve their dogs. They decline invitations to dog-free events, end friendships with people who don't appreciate their pet obsession, and structure their social lives entirely around dog-related activities. Their social circle shrinks to include only other devoted dog owners, creating an echo chamber that reinforces their dependency while cutting them off from perspectives that might help them recognize their dysfunction. Jung identified reality distortion as one of the most concerning warning signs. This involves attributing human-like consciousness, emotions, and understanding to dogs in ways that go far beyond normal pet affection. People in the risk zone believe their dogs understand complex human problems, make moral judgments, or possess supernatural intuitive abilities. They interpret normal dog behaviors as evidence of extraordinary intelligence or spiritual connection, creating elaborate fantasy relationships that substitute for dealing with real-world human complexities. Time management dysfunction reveals another dangerous pattern. Jung noticed that people crossing into the risk zone begin structuring their entire schedules around their pets' needs and preferences. They wake up at specific times for dog walks regardless of their own sleep needs, plan vacations only to dog-friendly destinations, and refuse social or professional commitments that would interfere with pet routines. Their time becomes completely organized around their animal's schedule rather than their own goals and responsibilities. Emotional regulation dependency represents a particularly problematic sign. People in Jung's risk zone become unable to manage stress, anxiety, or sadness without their pets present. They experience panic when separated from their dogs, cannot sleep when their animals aren't nearby, and feel emotionally unstable when their pets are ill or at the veterinarian. This dependency reveals that they've never developed internal emotional regulation skills, relying instead on their animals as external emotional support systems. Jung was especially concerned about human relationship avoidance patterns. People entering the risk zone begin finding excuses to avoid challenging human interactions, using their pets as shields against social and romantic commitments. They claim they're too busy with dog care for dating, too devoted to their pets for demanding friendships, or too concerned about their animals' well-being to pursue career opportunities that require travel or long hours. The pet becomes a socially acceptable excuse for avoiding the risks and challenges of human connection. Identity fusion represents another critical warning sign. Jung observed that people in the risk zone begin defining themselves primarily through their relationship with their pets. Their sense of identity, self-worth, and life purpose becomes completely intertwined with their role as dog owners. They introduce themselves by talking about their pets, measure their success by their animals' health and happiness, and feel their most important identity is as their dog's caretaker, rather than as individuals with independent goals and achievements. Perhaps most concerning is what Jung called growth cessation, the complete stopping of personal development and goal pursuit. People who have entered the risk zone stop setting new challenges for themselves, cease learning new skills, and abandon long-term goals that don't directly involve their pets. They become psychologically static, investing all their growth energy into their relationship with their animals, while their own human potential remains unrealized and underdeveloped.